Hey, this is Lauren from Let's Teach History, and today we are going to talk about deception, ice cream, and syphilis. So when I used to do my podcast episodes only without video, I would always put a teaser in there, and I was like, I need to start doing that again because it was always fun. So that I will bring those up and talk about those later. So what in the world does Christopher Columbus and the Columbian Exchange have to do with all of that? Well, I'm about to tell you. So let's get going. So as most of you know, Christopher Columbus can be a controversial figure. Some people don't even want to cover him. They want to cancel him. But I think the way I covered Christopher Columbus, I actually covered it today in class, you can cover it in such a way that it shows both sides, but it doesn't cancel him, but it also doesn't glorify his actions. And so that's what we're going to look at. And I've got some really cool tools and tips that we're going to talk about. All right, so what I typically would start with is a bell ringer. Now, I did not do that today because I am teaching in a homeschool co-op and we have shortened classes. So I did not do the bell ringer today, but in a normal classroom, I would do a bell ringer, and this is one of the ones I might use. So a bell ringer you put on your board, and you have your kids answer it on a sheet of paper before you get started. So while you're doing housekeeping, things like taking roll and stuff, they can answer this. So this is one that you might could put up. Imagine that you were chosen to be part of the first group of humans to explore and colonize Mars. What would be the benefits of being part of such an expedition? What would be the risks? Would you be willing to be part of such a group? Why or why not? And so what you do is, after the kids answer that, you can ask a few about their preferences or get them to raise their hands. But basically, you can explain to them that the guys who were going with Columbus knew that there were great risks to the journey. They knew that if the journey was successful, they would probably have money and fame, but if it wasn't, then they could be killed. And so I think that's just a good way to kind of put it in today's terms, so to speak. So that's a bell ringer that you could use, okay? Now, the next thing I did is, for me, probably one of my favorite things to do. Also, if I mention a resource, I will have a link to it on my blog page, letsteachhistory.com. So the next thing, okay, this is the amazing thing. Now, I gave the kids a quiz, and we did it as a class, but this is what I do. And I think this is a really good idea when some of your students have prior knowledge, but you're not sure exactly how much they have. It's a good way to either gauge the knowledge of the class or just to let students figure out what they know and what they don't know. And this is the amazing thing that I came up with right here, okay? This is a dry erase clipboard, okay? So when I was helping in kids ministry at church, one of the things we did, we were going through one of the stories, is the kids had to illustrate the story. They each got a dry erase clipboard. They got to illustrate the story and then draw different things, and they would erase stuff and draw it again. And they loved it. And even the ADHD kids sat still, and because think about your students. They always love to come in and draw on your whiteboard, and there's something about changing it up from pencil and paper to something just more tactile that they can play with or whatever. So these are, you can buy 6 for $14, which is a little steep if you have to buy 30, but on Amazon they do have 30 for, I'm thinking it was like $45. So you could get a class set for $45. Now what you could do is, if you have department money, that might be how you want to spend your department money. I don't know if you want to fork out $45 for a whole class set, but I would encourage you to get a class set. If you cannot afford these, what you can do is get a piece of cardstock, laminate it, one for each student, and that's a very cheap whiteboard. But I do think that these are better because the way I used it, they had to write their answer and hide it from everyone. And then I would say, reveal, and everybody would turn and show. So that way you didn't have students copying off of each other. And it was just anything that's tactile that you can do with learning, I would do. So I had a quiz on Columbus, and I would ask questions such as, true or false, Columbus was the first European to discover the New World. So then they would write their answer, and then I'd say, reveal. And then I would tell them the answer. And then we would talk about how, he wasn't the first European to discover the New World. People thought he was, but then they realized that Leif Erikson had done it. So you can use the question as the intro to the knowledge that goes with that question and cover it in increments. So there's interaction in between. You're not talking for 20 minutes straight. The kids interact in between, but you're still giving them a lot of information. And then another question might be, where did Columbus think he landed? And that's one of the harder ones. Most of these are multiple choice questions or true or false questions, but you can just tell them to guess. They could guess an area of the world or anything like that. And another question, and this goes to covering Columbus as a controversial figure. One of the questions is, true or false, Columbus treated the natives well. And so that is where you can talk about the violence that he used, the fact that he enslaved natives, and how he actually was arrested. Well, another question I've got is, true or false, Columbus died a hero. And on his third voyage, Columbus was actually arrested because of his cruelty and how he was governing in the Caribbean, whatever he was put in charge of. And so that's just a good way to cover it. And I think, I'm going to read you a quote real quick. So this is from Knotgrass Exploring History. I really like this. I don't know if it's a Christian text or not, but it's a homeschool text. But I just think this is really good the way this guy puts this. This is what he says. As you study history, you will see that most people and events are a mix of good and bad. President Bill Clinton oversaw unprecedented economic growth, but was a moral failure. Industrial growth gave us a better material life, but caused many workers to suffer. We would like to think that everything and everybody is either clearly good or clearly bad, but this is not the case. You and I are not completely good or completely evil. We are a mixture. People who do great things have clay feet. Presidents and generals have strong points and weak points. Events that bring progress have side effects. We must learn to distinguish between the good and the bad, often in the same person, institution, or event. And I just thought that was a great way to put it. We don't need to ignore the bad, but we also don't need to discount things that come out of a person's life because they've done something bad. And I'll tell you this too. If you teach something about if one person does something bad, they're bad forever, that's a very dangerous concept to teach to high schoolers who make mistakes and do stupid things. So I think you can teach them to evaluate the content of a person's life and the good things or the bad things that they're doing. But I think this idea that we're just going to cancel everybody because they don't line up with the perfect ideal of a historical figure is not, students aren't going to learn anything from that. You've got to cover the good and the bad. And the whole thing is, if you see a historical figure who is doing something bad, point it out and explain why it was bad. Don't just skip over it and pretend that nothing ever happened or you're just not going to talk about them. Like, use it as a teachable moment. Anyway, I'm off of my soapbox now. But I thought that was something we need to mention about Columbus. Okay, because he is a controversial figure. And honestly, sounds like he was a jerk to me. He was very brave, but he was a jerk. That's my opinion. Let's see. So, back to the quiz. So, my students really enjoyed this. They really enjoyed the reveal. They like that. So, seriously consider using the whiteboards. Another thing about whiteboards, you can use them if you're having a group competition in your classroom, and let's say you divide your students into groups and they have to give an answer, you could have them write on the clipboard for their group, and then they hold up the clipboard, and whichever team has the first correct answer. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can use these clipboards, but I just thought those were so great, and the kids loved them so much, so I thought I had to mention that. Okay, so after you go through the quiz, then what I do is I start talking about the Columbian Exchange. But before I do that, I show them a video about the, wait a minute, do I show them? No, I don't. I do my sort first. Sorry. Okay, so I do a sort of the Columbian Exchange. So what is the Columbian Exchange sort? Now, I like to use sorts a lot. I call them stand-in sorts in my classroom, and I've actually got a product. It's on Teachers Pay Teachers right now, but I am going to put it on my website store when I get that up and running. But so kids love to get up and move around and do things, and there are tons of things that you can categorize and sort in U.S. history. Tons of things. One thing being products from the old world and the new world. So what I do is you can either do it where students sort them on a table, they can sort them on the floor, you can have the class sort them on the wall, you can have a bunch of different groups sort, like however you want to do it, okay? But anyway, so what you do is you have two signs. You have the old world and the new world, and then you have products from the old world and the new world, and you give them to the students and you say, okay, I want you to tell me where you think these things came from. That's what you need to do. Tell them, you need to figure out, was rice around or did rice come from the new world? And make sure they know what new world refers to and old world refers to. So I always laminate these things. I will say the thing about sorts, They take time to set up simply because you have to cut all these out and laminate them. And I always laminate them after I cut them out so it gives you that edge, because if you just laminate the whole paper and then cut it out, if the edges get wet, it just doesn't last as long. But the thing is, once you do this one time, like for maybe 15 minutes on this one thing, it's done and it'll last for years. Okay, so and if you have students that want to stay after school and help, have them cut it out and then you go laminate it. But anyway, so the students can either do it at, like I said, on the floor, on the table, and they can sort these products. Now, what kind of clues can you give them? This is what I tell them. I let them look at everything first. Give them a few minutes to check on everything. And then I'll tell them these hints. One, most of the things that came from the New World are things you think of with around Thanksgiving. What are things related to Thanksgiving? And the other thing I tell them is, okay, let's think about the Middle Ages and before the Middle Ages. Did they have these products before then? Like, for example, wheat. You can say, well, wheat is used to make bread. Did they have bread before the New World? Did the Greeks have bread? Did the Romans have bread? Was there bread in the Middle Ages? Stuff like that. Or like horses, okay? A lot of people don't know that horses came from the Old World. So if they think, oh, horses must be a New World, you could be like, so are you saying that the Greeks never had horses or the Romans didn't have horses? So you can ask questions like that help them, because some of them, these things they're not going to have a clue about, okay? And then after they sort everything, it's up to you how much help you want to give them and whether you want to go over it as a class or just make sure every group has it right. But usually I give them a few minutes to do it. Once people have it mostly right, then we go through each item and we explain, oh yeah, this is New World, this is Old World, and make sure that they sort it and they know it. But it gives the kids a chance to get up, move around. So if you sort, and I'll put this in my little, all this stuff you'll be able to download. So if you want it to be big like this, where they would do it on a table, then just print it normal size. But if you wanted to do it where one kid could do it at their desk, then you could probably print 2 pages per page, and I think that would be small enough, but I don't know, that might be too small to work with. So, all right, then after that, I have a video on the Columbian Exchange that I show them. It's a very short video. It's only like 2 minutes long, but it does a good job of explaining the Columbian Exchange and why it was important. I think it's very important to reinforce with video, because video, it's like our kids' language. It speaks to them. It speaks to me. Okay, now after this is where you have options depending on how long your class is. I have doodle notes on Columbus that you can use. And in case you don't know what doodle notes are notes that have visual cues along with them that relate to what the kids are studying, so that it helps their brain remember it more. And studies show, like, if you doodle while you're listening to something, that you remember, like, I think it's like 60 to 80% more information. I can't remember the exact numbers, but you remember more if you're doodling while you're listening. So this whole concept of doodle notes came up. And so I've got a set of Columbus doodle notes that you can use now, because by this point in time in class, you will have gone over most of the information on your doodle notes. So whether you want to sit there and go through all of them again, like, I don't know that I do that. What I would do is take the doodle notes, give the kids the word bank. I've got a word bank that will go with it, and let them fill in the doodle notes based on their knowledge and the word bank. Or if they're high level, don't give them the word bank and tell them, figure it out using context clues. What do you think goes there? And then you can have them check it or go over it or whatever. So you can do the doodle notes, or if you don't have enough time, you can just give them a copy of the filled in doodle notes. You can have them highlight the important stuff and just hit some points that you didn't hit earlier, okay? And then what about the assignment? Like, you need something that's going to reinforce their knowledge, that makes them display their knowledge. And this is where you can either do it for homework or in class assignment. And that is, you have your students create a Facebook page about Columbus. So there are a lot of free Facebook templates on Teachers Pay Teachers. I'm going to link to one that I think works particularly well for this one. And so what I do is I tell my students, okay, you need to create a Facebook page about Columbus. And so they have in that Facebook template, they've got one that you can print out that's blank. So, or you can, it's a digital one. So it's up to you which one you want to use. But I will say this, with the invention of AI and things like that, it's going to be a lot easier for the kids to generate things at home that are not created by them, so to speak. And so I would say, if kids say, I want to do this at home, say, okay, well, give me a rough draft here. Show me exactly what you're going to do. Because I used to have kids that would say that, well, I'm going to do this at home, you know. Like, no, you need to start now where I can see you. But anyway, so Facebook page. So what would I have them do? Well, for example, they have to have 2 ads. And I would say, okay, well, create an ad that Columbus would create. Like, what ad would he create? So he's thinking, like, you know, he might advertise for soldiers, or, I mean, not soldiers, sailors, or soldiers to go with him. What kind of ad would show up on Columbus's Facebook page? What would Columbus type? What's one post that he would type about his journey? What would he say about his journey? And let's see, I've got others. Likes, like 3 likes and two friends pictures. So basically, they're filling in what they know about Columbus. Another thing I've got is there is a biographical video from Biography. There's a shocker, from the Biography website / channel. And it's about 3 minutes long, and it goes over the biography of Columbus. So you can also have your kids watch that either before the Facebook page, or say, hey, if you're stuck, look at the video, and then, which I've embedded all this in my post. Look at the video and then go back through your Facebook page or create your Facebook page and do it that way. So that can be your homework or your in-class assignment, or you can do other things, but that's just what I did. So that's Columbus and the Columbian Exchange. You know what? I did not do my 3 things, so I will tell you my 3 things. Okay. Deception. What does that have to do with anything? Did you know? I did not know this until this week, that Columbus actually created 2 different logs when he was sailing. One log was the actual log that had his actual distance in it, but the other log was a fake log that underestimated the distances that he went, so the crew would not be discouraged that they were so far away from home, because the danger of mutiny at sea was a very real thing. And so Columbus did not want to deal with that. So he basically forged the log to make it look shorter, to make the trip look shorter, like they weren't as far away from Europe as they thought they were. So deception, Columbus, deceit. Okay, the other thing, I think it was the Pinta. The Pinta, they had to stop in the Canary Islands for 2 months to repair the rudder on the Pinta. So I thought that was interesting. Most people don't ever talk about that. Now, that's your deception. What about ice cream? Well, vanilla beans and cacao. Cacao! That makes me think of Cars, like Lightning McQueen, but instead of cacao, it's cacao. Cacao beans, which is what chocolate's from. Praise the Lord. So we would not have vanilla and chocolate ice cream if we didn't have the New World, if the New World was not around, because vanilla and chocolate both came from the New World. And then finally, syphilis. And this goes to our discussion of the Columbian Exchange. Now, you may not want to talk about this in class, but it's just something interesting to know. So one of the big problems with the Columbian Exchange is that the Europeans brought a bunch of diseases over that the natives had no natural immunity to. So smallpox, influenza, all that stuff. And so they think that as much as 90% of the native populations were wiped out because of these European diseases. But they did have one disease that they're pretty sure made its way from the old world to the new world, and that is syphilis. And they believe that it was brought over from the sailors from Columbus having relations with the native women, and then they brought it back to the old world. So, interesting things. I guess all those rumors about sailors back in the day were true, but I thought that was interesting. So, even if you don't use all of these to teach Christopher Columbus and the Columbian Exchange, you can use some of these, hopefully. I think, you got 3 videos and the quizzes and other things. So I will have all this, if you're listening to this on my podcast, I will have all of these listed on my website, and you can look at those. And I think that is it for me. So I hope that, you have an awesome school year. And if you've already taught Christopher Columbus, then you can just do it again in the spring if you are on a block schedule, or save it for next year. I'll talk to you later. One more thing I almost forgot. If you have resources that are good for teaching Columbus and the Columbian Exchange, please send them to me so that I can have them for later and then possibly put them as recommended resources on the blog. So I would love to hear how you teach the Columbian Exchange and what you do. And I hope you have an awesome week and enjoy teaching about Columbus.